G'day, Rockhound here! What you see here is a brand new image of one of the alien Ark machines from Ark Raiders. This is one of a mammoth 60 plus new images, most of which are of the game environment, that appeared during a couple of recent Embark Studios developer tech talks. I'll be taking a look at all the new images for you shortly, along with a game map that has enabled me to take you on what is more or less a virtual tour of the Ark Raiders landscape, after which you should have a pretty good picture of the different areas. The images mark what is possibly the most detailed update about the Ark Raiders environment that we've seen since the game's announcement. And after looking through all the images, I'm even more excited about the open world environment this free-to-play third-person shooter game is going to offer us. In fact, I had a moment where I actually got goosebumps on my arm from how stunning the game environment looks. Now, while I cover both of Embark Studios shooter games on this channel, I really didn't expect to be making a video about Ark Raiders right now, with the excitement of the finals closed beta still not far from our grasp. But a couple of new videos of recent presentations given at the GDC Hive conference by Embark Studios lead 3D artist Eric Hallberg and environment art lead Darko Prasic emerged and have provided us with this substantial suite of new images for what will be Embark Studios' second game to be released. For those of you new to this, Embark Studios originally planned to release the free-to-play third-person cooperative game as their first release, but last year instead moved forward the development timeline of the finals and pushed Ark Raiders well back into 2023, so they have time to add a PvP mode to that game. That change effectively saw a temporary cessation of information about the game that will have you and your squad of raiders unite to resist the onslaught of Ark, a ruthless mechanized threat descending from space, as well as the PvP part, which we know nothing about. My own assumption has been that we would see the finals released before we even heard anything more about Ark Raiders, but I have been keeping my eyes peeled for any new information about the game from Embark Studios, and now we have something significant. The two tech presentations, which I've linked in the video description below, saw Eric Hallberg talking about the making of assets, weapons, buildings, and other objects in the game, and Darko Prasic discussing how Embark can produce large-scale landscapes that are not only realistic, but highly playable as well. Both talks focused on how rapidly they can make assets and landscapes. And that efficiency part might only seem important to the game makers, but once these two free-to-play games are out, one of the ways to capture an audience and foster a player base is to have great content being released regularly. That way, there's always something new just around the corner to keep players in the game, which is important for all of us. While Eric Hallberg's presentation mostly showed weapons and objects that are part of the finals, there were a few Ark Raiders images scattered in his presentation too, which I'll show you shortly. But just for a moment, I want to note that he explained pretty fittingly what overall goal Embark are trying to achieve through their new tech. The old school game making way is, put bluntly, to complete games that are full of new assets by essentially using siege tactics. Just throw lots of artists at the work required until it's done. But Eric pointed out that this becomes unproductive and bureaucratic as the size of the studio grows into hundreds or even thousands of staff. That leads to an inability to adapt quickly, a choke on letting new ideas evolve, and it results in a behemoth from Battlefield 1. Tears and screaming. I'm sure that fiery Zeppelin image was purely coincidental. The Embark team's goal, since its foundation in late 2018, has been to make tools that allow more efficient ways to make games. Being able to rapidly generate assets in large-scale realistic environments should provide them with the freedom to innovate, the room to experiment, and lead them to their own personal version of Nirvana. So the basis for the presentations aside, and I encourage you to watch them in your own time, I've linked them in the video description below, let's now get stuck into looking at all the new juicy Ark Raiders images and their locations on the map. And let's start with what is our first look at the Ark Raiders map. Immediately it shows us that the game is set in a largely volcanic landscape, dominated by a large stratovolcano in the west, presuming north is up, and a surrounding mountain range to the east, which is called Rust Belt Ridge. Between the two are a number of cinder cones, steam vents, and a variety of landscape types. The overall area is more or less an exact replica of Mount Teide on the Spanish island of Tenerife. This comes as no surprise, as the environmental art team from Embark visited Tenerife as part of a series of photogrammetry trips, which also included a visit to another volcanic landscape, Iceland. Here I have overlaid the map with a satellite image of the Mount Teide area in Tenerife, and we can flip back and forwards between them so you can see just how similar they are. The volcano and the steep cliffs of Rust Belt Ridge on the map are pretty much the same as they are in real life, albeit with their direction rotated. I think what Embark has also done is take additional volcanic features from Iceland and use those to augment the landscape in between the main volcano and its amphitheatre-like surrounding ridge. Rust Belt Ridge is pretty steep and may represent the boundary of the map. So we have the big volcano, Rust Belt Ridge, that curves from north to east, and then the best way for us to explore the areas in between is just to jump into the images. So let's begin our tour of the Ark Raiders landscape. We'll start here in the Red Lakes area, which will be familiar to you from the Ark Raiders trailer, as it's home to a flamboyance of flamingos. Hello?
A flamingo has escaped.
Call me back. As I was saying, it's home to a flamboyance of flamingos. The rosy-coloured water of the Red Lakes is the result of the presence of halobacteria living in the water that resides amongst the area's salt flats. Red Lakes also has a collapsed dam at the north end of it. Our first new image is positioned at the dam end of the lakes and looks back towards the hills that provided the overview in the trailer. From here we can see a handful of derelict buildings, a collapsed motorway bridge and some towers. These might be good areas for finding loot. We'll then move to a position further east in the foothills of Rust Belt Ridge, and here we see many abandoned structures on the hills, more of the collapsed motorway bridge and some very tall towers on the skyline. I wonder if we'll be able to climb those. In the foreground, a dirt vehicle track posing the question, will there be vehicles in the game? And we previously saw concept art for Star Wars-like speeders, but these weren't present in the game trailer, so vehicles are a bit of an unknown at this stage. The next image is positioned here, looking back towards this area. A good close-up look at the salt flats, part of the destroyed motorway bridge which we saw in the game trailer and is climbable, and then the dominant Rust Belt Ridge in the background which looks pretty impassable. The collapsed dam is to the northeast here, so let's move to the images in that area. Here we're almost on top of the dam. Looking northwest, we can see that the dam has collapsed or was destroyed over part of the spillway. Immediately behind the dam is a wetland area that we'll see images of shortly, including these interesting towers. But for now, note that the wetland area is almost at the same level as the breach in the dam, which means that the wetland is located on top of the soft lake sediment that built up behind the dam throughout its lifetime, and is at a much higher elevation than the Red Lakes on the other side of the dam. Beyond the wetlands is an area named Alcantara on the map, a partly collapsed cinder cone possibly named Little Dome. Just beyond that is a mostly destroyed motorway bridge and of course the main volcano. Behind Alcantara we can barely see a refinery dome and pronged tower in an area called the White Dunes, which we'll come to. Let's move here. On top of the dam we see that a road crossed the dam, but at some point checkpoint barricades were set up to slow vehicles. This might start to fill in more details about the events that may have occurred around the time that the Ark alien craft started turning up on Earth. The towers on the dam have doors and might be enterable, which would be amazing. I hope we get to explore the interiors of these structures. I mean, imagine the tunnel network that could be within a dam. On the right, a communication tower that looks like it has temporary power supplied to it through cables, potentially allowing the raiders to communicate with one another over large distances. Moving a little further towards the main volcano, just beyond the western end of the dam, we get a better view of the destroyed motorway bridge. This is a nighttime view of that broken bridge area. It also appears to be raining in this image. Back to the previous image, we have some curious looking towers with spheres scattered around them, and this is a close-up view of one of those towers from Eric Hallberg's assets presentation. Here we can see the edge of the wetlands behind the dam, then Little Dome, and the top of the pronged tower at the abandoned refinery in the White Dunes area. We can see pretty long distances here, which will make for some interesting sniping opportunities, assuming sniper weapons are in the game. This area is called Tricolo on the map. Note the wisp of orographic cloud atop the volcano here. It'll be really interesting to see what variety of weather elements we see in the game, including volumetric clouds. This image is captured from within the Tricolo area. It's filled with rugged lava fields, potentially a nightmare to traverse, but that may also be a challenge that the larger ground-based Ark machines face as well. This area also seems to appear briefly in the trailer. Also near the dam is a woodland area. We have a number of images of woodland and eucalypt trees amongst the new images. In some places the woods are quite dense, which will make for a challenging combat, both PvE and PvP. Let's now move from the woods to the wetland area behind the dam. This aerial view shows the myriad of waterways, bird life, trees, and these odd towers. My first guess is that they may be some way of extracting swamp gas from the underlying ground. We can also just see the base of a high-tension electricity tower on the edge of the Alcantara area. Here's an early morning view of the Alcantara area looking back toward the dam, the high-tension electricity towers on the left and the wetlands in between. Some of the wetland areas on the map get pretty swampy, and here they have a lot of grasses, quite a lot of contrast to the desert areas. Further north, the wetlands come close to many abandoned structures, like this massive tower for instance. More communications towers are visible here as well. This seems to be the factory featured in the trailer where a group of raiders are tackling a ground-based baron. I wonder if these gas storage tanks can be blown up. This looks like it will be a fantastic area to explore and find plenty of loot amongst the buildings and abandoned vehicles. Quite a number of the images feature factories and other structures, either internally or in locations that aren't very clear, so let's have a look at those now. There's some really fantastic lighting in these buildings, and they look like they're going to provide us plenty of opportunity for exploring and looting. Seeing the size and scope of all of these, it also makes me wonder if the PvP mode for Ark Raiders is going to be a bit like DayZ or even Escape from Tarkov, where players can roam large tracts of the countryside and explore the abandoned buildings for loot while constantly staying on guard for unexpected encounters with opponents. Let me know in the comments below what you would like to see in the PvP mode. Before we move on, this factory image is particularly interesting because in the background it looks like there's a massive structure that is built right against Rust Belt Ridge. It's seen here in this presentation slide, which also seems to show a structure on top of Rust Belt Ridge. Now, how far that structure goes into the mountainside is unclear, but perhaps there is scope for quite a lot of underground play in Ark Raiders. Okay, let's move on with our tour around the map. We only have a few images of the Red Barrens area, this low light one with the broken motorway here, little dome partly obscured here, and the main volcano looming in the background. We get a reverse view of the same location here, which has Rust Belt Ridge dominating the backdrop. And there's a few volcanic steam vents in the area overlooking Little Dome. This might be a great location for those keen on a little in-game photography. Moving north from the Red Barrens, we have the White Dunes, possibly the most picturesque part of the map. The central part of the White Dunes is littered with the remains of what looks like a large gas refinery, with the white sands burying many parts of the remnants. The area isn't completely dry, as there are a few ponds amongst the dunes, and on its fringes are some volcanic vents with pools of water in them. Probably not for filling your water bottle up with though. West of the White Dunes are the Red Dunes. Massive tracts of sand have buried buildings and cars here, as well as these massive dual towers which look like some sort of launch facility. I hope we can scale their interior. Now here I think we have a plan view of where these towers are located from Darko's presentation. This appears to be a grey box version of the facility the towers are in, so it looks like they're surrounded by multiple buildings for us to explore. Lastly, we have a view from the flanks of the volcano, giving us a visual collage of features across the Ark Raiders landscape. Below us is a solar power plant being engulfed by the sand of the Red Dunes. Beyond that, the collapsing motorway and a large dune on the right that provides us an access point to the road. Beyond that, the large dual towers, the factory area, and finally we can see that large structure that seems to be built right into Rust Belt Ridge. So I hope you enjoyed that tour around the Ark Raiders landscape. I'll leave you with 3 final new images that each give us a bit of an insight into the lore of Ark Raiders. This indoor image appears to be a glimpse inside the Raiders' home base, but where exactly is that located on the map, or are there multiple bases? Then we have a swath of abandoned cars, trucks and vans littering the road near a checkpoint or toll station. It looks like whatever stopped the cars from working happened very quickly, but what happened here? Was everyone trying to evacuate the area when they were caught by the Ark machines, or is there more to the story? And here we have what looks like an abandoned nuclear device. What was its planned use and how did it get left here? I guess we'll have to wait to find out. If you enjoyed this video, please consider sharing it for others to watch. Thanks for watching, enjoy the rest of your day, kia kaha, stay strong.
Everybody knows the world ain't right. Down on your knees, get up and fight.